All right, guys, today is Friday, May 13th, 2022. So today marks day 7 working on my 55 two-door hardtop project. If you've been watching the videos I've been working on this is the 7th day, I've been working on this car. My plan was to get it running and drivable with the body panels on it and everything, enough to use it and start driving it. You know, maybe not finish the door panels and the trunk upholstery and that type of stuff, but you know, I wanted to be able to drive it up here to the gas station, you know, to get a drink or whatever I need to do, take the dog to the groomer over here or whatever. You know, I need a vehicle, so this was the idea. So I put the engine in and I had a noise, and at one point I thought I had it figured out, and then the GoPro was picking up the sound of the clack sound. It sounded like an exhaust leak or a really, really loose rocker arm, and it sounded like it was on this side of the engine, definitely at the front, but I was having all kinds of hell, man. And I thought it was the fuel pump push rod and the mechanical fuel pump. Ended up at one point, took the fuel pump and the push rod off of the engine, started it up, and I didn't hear it, but the GoPro picked it up. And then I come back out the next day and started it up without that stuff, and sure enough, it was clacking pretty loud. So it was intermittent. So I think we got it figured out. My buddy Jason just left. He was off work today. I contacted him yesterday, or day before yesterday, and he said he would come over this morning. So he just left. We've been on this thing for a good half a day. We think we got it figured out, and I'll run you through that. So I pulled the oil pan off. I pulled a couple of the rod caps. We pulled the front main cap. Bearings are still awesome. Pulled looked over everything up here. The back side of the timing cover, there was no marks. When I had the car running, I had the valve cover off and the valve train. There was no noise up here. Because when I first started the car from day one, the very first startup, when I started it up and then I walked around here, it sounded like an exhaust leak or a loose, really loose rocker arm. And I knew the rockers were adjusted. So I thought I left the header bolts loose, but that wasn't what it was. I checked those, they were tight. And then that's why I took the valve cover off, because I was going to run the rockers with it running. But there's no noise up here on the valve train. This is all quiet, even with them roller tips. I was pretty happy about that. But anyway, that's why I thought it was a fuel pump push rod, or possibly the fuel pump arm or something, because it was just a clack, and it was intermittent, and it was loud, and it was light, and then at one point you wouldn't hear it, and the GoPro was picking it up. I mean, it was kind of a strange deal. And I called a bunch of people yesterday. I called some of my mentors that I've learned stuff from as a kid, and I have them stumped. So that's interesting. So what we ended up doing was the cam button in the timing chain right here in the gear. When I assembled this engine, this is my first hydraulic roller camshaft. Let me re-specify that. This is my very first roller cam, old school 2-piece remain small block. The only roller cam small blocks I've had is the late model 1-piece remains that come with a factory roller. This is my first old school small block Chevy that had a retrofit roller cam in it. So this is kind of all new stuff I learned doing this. So they want you to put in a cam button. So I bought a cam button from Summit, nylon on the end of it, and when I was building the engine, I put the cam button in there with the lock plate, bolted it in and done. I do have to take these 2 bolts out and put my plate on here. There's a little lock plate that goes on there to hold them down. We were just doing it this way to, we were putting shims behind that is what we were doing. So what we ended up finding out was we put the timing cover back on, and Jason took a screwdriver and went down through oil drain hole right here and got on the back side of the lobe of the cam. And he moved the cam back first. We loosened all the rocker arms completely off till there was no tension on the lifters. But he pushed the cam back with the screwdriver first, all the way back. Then he put the screwdriver up there and forced that cam forward, and it went clack. So he moved it back again, did it again, and it went clack. So there was all kinds of space in between the cam button and the timing cover. And I never in a million years would have thought that you would get a clack sound from a nylon gear and a timing cover, but it did it. Now, I can't say for certain that's the exact sound and that is what's wrong with the car, but he's 100% sure this is the problem. So He's confident enough. He told me to put it back together. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. We ended up taking the cam button off, and we experimented with some shims. We took the back side of the timing cover, and I would tape feeler gauges right here. We were taking the feeler gauges off of the deal, and we were taping them like one to the timing cover, taping it to it, not where tape's in front of the button. I would tape it down low, and then we'd bolt the timing cover back on, and then he would move it forward and back to see how much movement there is. He told me the clearance, I don't remember what it was, but it's hardly anything. So 7 thousandths or something. It was really minimal. Like, you wouldn't even notice it really. But we ended up having, by the time we were done, it took a 25 thousandths shim behind that cam button. That is amazing. So now when you move the cam forward and back, it doesn't clack. It has hardly any movement at all. So he's ready. He thinks it's ready. But what I ended up doing was, our initial thought was to cut up one of them feeler gauges, but they're kind of thin, and I wanted something, the same diameter as the cam button. And I told him I had some starter shims over there, so we went through and started calipering these out, and we found the one that was 25 thousandths. So I traced it out, I cut it out with 10 snips, and then I used some 180 grit on a little sanding block, and I smoothed all the edges and everything, and we stuck it in there, and that's what it ended up taking. We did a 15 thousandths first, and it didn't fix it, but the 25 worked. So that is amazing. He said that is a lot. So just so you know, if you're going to learn from my stupidity and my mistakes, you need to make sure you don't have a lot of space in between your cam button and your timing cover if you're going to run a roller cam. So I learned the hard way, and it always costs me money for an education. And in this case, by the time I buy another $50 Felpro one-piece pan gasket and a timing chain cover gasket and intake gaskets, it's going to be just about probably close to $100 of an education. But I got to tell you, that is the best way you learn is from mistakes, because you'll never forget it. I never have. So, I always messed with these small blocks, and I built a bunch of them and drag raced a bunch of them. I love these things. I've never had problems like I have had with this one and the one that come out of here, but I've never run a retrofit roller cam before. I've always run hydraulic flat tappets. You just put the timing chain in, bolt it on, and rock and roll. You don't really run a cam button with a hydraulic flat tappet, you know what I mean? So I learned a lesson, but I mean, if all it's going to cost me is $100 and the engine's fixed, I'm good with it. I'm 100% good with it, because I always look at how it could be worse on something. You know what I mean? Because my initial thought was wrist pin, and one of my mentors said he didn't think it was a wrist pin with it being, quiet and then loud, and then he said they kind of just do it all the time, the same sound. So with the ones he said he's only had a couple engines do it, but they've always had the same steady sound. Now, there could be one that has a bad wrist pin that could be different, but in his experience with the two he's had is what I'm saying. But so it's probably going to take me a full day to get all the sealing surfaces cleaned back up, and all the parts cleaned back up to reseal them and everything. But hopefully I'll be firing this thing up maybe this weekend or maybe next week. So I thought, when I had the noise and I couldn't figure it out when it wasn't the fuel pump, I decided I'd probably go ahead and tear the engine out of the truck and work on it. And it's probably going to take a week to do that truck. And I just slept on it basically, and I come out the next day and just come out here and start tearing in this engine, because I was basically on a mission trying to find out what went wrong is what I was doing. So the very first thing I did was start pulling rod caps, because I wanted to find out if something was wrong. Oil still looks nice in the pan. The pan's not full of contaminants, so I'm happy. I mean, it was still holding 60 pounds of oil pressure, so that's good. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much the update on the hardtop. I think it's probably fixed, but then again, it still could not be, but I'm not going to know until I put it back together. But Jason's 100% confident that that was the issue, because when you would push the cam forward, it would go clack onto that timing cover. So that's pretty amazing. And I knew it was at the front of the engine, it wasn't at the back, because, you know, I didn't have the fenders on the car with it running, so I could stick my head right up in here. And I realized engine sounds can travel, you know, harmonics and stuff through them, and sometimes what sounds like it's in the front could be in the rear and that type of stuff. But I was dead set on it being up here in the front. That's why I focused so much on that fuel pump rod. But so I've ended up, I spent 22 bucks on a fuel pump and $12 on a fuel pump push rod for a brand new one. So again, you know, 135 bucks, we'll say, on an education. That's pretty awesome. I mean, I'll take it. You know, at least I didn't, you know, put a rod cap on backwards or have something screwed up and it's, you know, fried something. Hopefully. We did check all the rod caps under there and make sure they were oriented right and all that. So, I mean, when you tear one down this far, you can kind of check a lot of stuff, you know what I mean, with it still in the car. But of course, you got to keep in mind, with no front clip on it was easy to get to. But he's 100% confident on it. Me, you know, I am pretty convinced, but I will be more convinced when I start it up and I don't hear that sound. That's pretty much that. But I thought if I could get this thing fixed in a couple of days, find out what the sound is and get it fixed, I would just stay working on this before I tore that truck down and have 3 torn apart vehicles here. So I do have an issue that I did not foresee. So my mom and dad come over a few days ago, and my dad's like, hey, you've got a small block 305 that was built for the 4-door. I completely forgot about this. This is a 1987 SS Monte Carlo Aero Coupes 305 HO short block right here, and I rebuilt it. I put new bearings, I just overhauled it. All new seals and rings and bearings and honed it and did all that stuff. But anyway, that is on the stand. I didn't even paint it or anything yet. I don't even know if I have the oil pump bolted down on it. I just have the pan setting on it. The camshaft's in it, but no lifters. But the heads that I have for that engine are perimeter bolt. These are the old school heads. They take the valve cover bolts, you know, out here, this is called perimeter bolt. This was what I was using on the 4-door because I'm using this same valve cover on her 4-door 55. So that's a later model one-piece for her main block, but I'm using the older heads. So I do have a 305 I can put in my truck, but I don't have those heads. That is an 87 throttle body fuel injected GMC truck, 305 TBI. So that is center bolt valve covers with the funky intake, you know, with the 2 straight up bolts on the center of both sides. So I need another set of heads, because either that or I'm going to have those off that engine to build those, because that truck smokes really bad and uses oil. So, you know, it's probably going to need valve guides. So I'm kind of short a set of heads on that deal, which I could probably build those if the valve guides ain't too worn out. I could lap them, you know, and put new valve seals on and that type of crap. But if they need valve guides, it's going to cost me a few $100 or more to get the heads rebuilt in a machine shop. So, which would be there for a while. So that's why, another reason why I didn't kind of continue on and come out the next day and just immediately start working on the truck. So my buddy Jason did bring me this morning when he showed up. He always brings me gifts. He brought me this stuff. This is 2 sets of center bolt heads. One set is off a 350, one set is off a 305. So I do have a set of heads here, but the 305 head, if I can find it, right there. Move this out of the way and show you. I thought, oh boy, I got a set of heads, but no such luck. See that valve right there? Got a lot of space there, and it's almost touching here, so this valve's bent. So not so much. I almost had a center bolt set of 305 heads right there. I probably, you know, I could at least take it apart and check the valve in there, see how wobbly it is or whatever, which is what I usually do. But if they don't wobble a whole lot, I'll just lap the valves and put new valve seals on and call it a day. But I know that truck, the heads on it definitely need that at least, because it does smoke and use oil. But I mean, it could be rings too. It's probably a little bit of everything. But anyway, he also showed me something else, and I did not know this, and so I'll share that with you guys. Education. So on these center bolt small block Chevy heads, this was pretty interesting to know, because I have more experience with the old school perimeter bolts than I do these center bolt heads. See this little arrow right here, or the top, the one hump right here? That's how you tell a 305 on the 87 and up, you know, center bolt heads. It's that one single hump is 305, 2 humps is 350. That's how you know if you see them somewhere. I mean, when you 305, 350 is pretty obvious, especially when you turn them like this. But if they're on a vehicle or on an engine, that's how you can kind of tell. But so a 305 will have a really wide gap between the cylinders here compared to a 350. That's a heck of a lot thinner on that 350 right here than a 305. So 305s have, they're usually 58cc on a perimeter bolt. I do not know on these late model 76cc, or I mean center bolts, but I'm pretty sure they're probably 58 as well. But that vent valve would probably, and it may just need a new valve, I don't know, but you know, it could have hurt the guide a little bit, I don't know. But so got an education today on clearancing for a roller camshaft, cam button, and how to visually tell the difference in those late model center bolt heads like that. So interesting. These are not Vortec heads. I want to make that clear. These are not Vortec. These are like 87 to, I don't know, up to the early 90s something. I'm not for sure actually on what year was the cutoff before they went to Vortec. But, and I do want to tell you, a true Vortec head, an absolute true Vortec head, does not have bolt holes in the center. You only have 2 in the front, 2 in the back. So anybody that tries to sell a set of Vortec heads, if they got holes right here, they are not Vortec. It's probably those heads right there. So that's just like TBI, Chevy half-ton or 3/4 ton, whatever truck, you know what I mean? So 305 or 350. And if you didn't know, now you know. So, all right guys, I'm gonna get back to it. Sorry for the long video. There's a lot to talk about, but I think may have found the smoking gun on the engine, but I'll know more in a couple days when I get back together. But if it starts up and I don't have no more clack sound, I'm back on the hardtop. So once that engine's back together and it starts and it's not knocking, the next thing I'm going to start on is painting the door and the trunk lid. So, and it's go time for assembly at that point. I'm going to jump off here, guys. Sorry for the long video. Thanks for watching.